If you know me, chances are you already know that I have a deep attachment to the franchise that is Violet Evergarden. The anime as a whole stands out as my absolute favorite series of all time. It's everything I never knew I loved when I first watched it. Conceptually sound, extremely well characterized, beautifully written, and stunning and gorgeous in its production value concerning its animation and music. And my love for this series has only been amplified by the 2 movies that came out afterwards. Now, I'm not doing a review on the series since I've already done a review on it before, and let's be honest, I'll probably remake that video in the future, but instead, I'm going to focus on what makes this series so special to me. Violet Evergarden herself. Violet is a character that I hold in a place dear to my heart, a learning and growing soul going from a weapon of war to a fully realized human constantly acquiring different emotions, cues, and feelings along the way, being able to stand out as my favorite protagonist in anything. But to answer the question of why this character in particular is so special to me, I'm gonna have to go through her entire journey from beginning to end, dissecting any important developments along the way. And just to let you all know, this is my opinion. You can have whatever character as your favorite protagonist, I'm just making a case for Violet. The entire introduction of Violet as a character is a prime example of quintessential characterization. As soon as she wakes up in the infirmary, she immediately begins writing a report to the late Gilbert, showing her diligence and tenacity in times of war. But it also shows how hyperfixated she is on her work and taking orders that she doesn't really register the fact that A, the war is over, and B, she really needs to catch a break. This in turn sets up her potential as a character, and thus it's established that the very first arc that Violet will have to go through is readjusting to society after the war is over. Because after such a long period of violent turmoil and taking orders and sides, what is she supposed to do other than follow Gilbert's last order, but not? That is to live a plentiful life. Violet is pretty much like an action drama protagonist that is thrown into a chill slice of life setting, or more accurately, a more literal interpretation of Steven Universe. The only time she's going to do anything other than wait for another war is if the one person who has given her everything in her life gives her orders. And the only thing Violet has going off of that is, "I love you." Since that's a phrase she can't understand because of her initially deadpan demeanor, she goes on her personal journey solely to find out what Gilbert means by that. It's not of her own free will, and she still has a long way to go before developing a sense of individuality, but it's a legitimate step forward in finding her place in a peaceful society that admittedly is better than the reality we currently live in. Okay, I'll try not to go off topic here because this next part is something that I'm really passionate about. So, in consequence to her time at war and following direct orders, Violet is not very apt in picking up social cues, understanding others, and even she doesn't fully understand why she acts the way she acts. As such, the development she goes through is not just because she wants to understand what Gilbert's last words meant, but also because later on she'll pick up on certain emotions that she can apply to her experiences. Now, this setup is fantastic, but its execution could have completely ruined Violet's character. Fortunately, how the writing carries out this part of her arc is nigh perfect. It does something very interesting and absolutely to its benefit by not having the development of her character Violet-centric, but instead viewing her journey through the eyes of side characters in their own self-contained stories. Episode 2 barely matters in Erica's case, but it's equally as important as episode 1 in terms of characterizing Violet. There are 2 points of significance here: the scene where Violet claps a disgruntled old man, and the scene where Violet doesn't understand this woman who is straight up gaslighting her crush. This yet again shows Violet's lack of awareness of the consequences of her actions, and also how she cannot pick up the subtle and somewhat contradictory language of those around her. Which, to be honest, that lady had it coming if she was wanting to play games. Her development continues like so. In episode 3, she takes a simple step in communicating a feeling of someone else to another. Bear in mind, telling one person someone else's feelings is a very difficult thing to do. Episode 4, Violet is first introduced to the concept of concealed feelings, reminiscing history, and embracing individuality. Iris first harbors feelings from her family without fully understanding why, followed by her confronting her history with those around her, and then finally being able to tell them that she wants to become her own person, all of which will reach Violet somehow and lead her on her journey to embrace her freedoms. Episodes 5, 6, and 7 deal a lot with connecting the feelings of others with what Violet seems to feel. Everything from admiration to isolation to feeling as if something is missing in your life, which is further developed in episodes 10 and 11. And also, she gets the parasol. And quick side note, because I don't want to go off on a tangent, as someone who is neurodivergent, I heavily headcanon Violet to be on the autism spectrum. She doesn't quite adjust well to disturbances in routines and schedules. She can't pick up on certain social cues and other tones such as jokes and sarcasm. She appears apathetic but actually isn't. She has a hard time presenting herself as someone approachable, and she has a special interest in her job as an auto memory doll. Over time, she gains more empathy in her arc, not because she's a murderous psycho, probably, but because she genuinely doesn't understand people despite her wanting to. There are people who find her as a very positive form of representation, even if it's unintentional. This is a war machine we're talking about. I could go on and on about this, but that'll have to be a discussion for another time. So far, Violet has been doing a good job readjusting to civilization as well as getting to know others and herself, but all of this is largely because she perceived this as some trivial mission, and will soon learn how she'll react to the fact that the reason she thought she was doing all of this is almost entirely non-existent. Out of virtually nowhere, Violet hears that her major, Gilbert, has seemingly passed away. Initially, she reacts with denial, but swiftly moves to the next stage of grief, that being anger. She hastily checks for confirmation of his absence, which is eventually warranted. She searches far and wide, hoping that something could fill in that missing space in her heart. Bargaining. And when she loses all hope, all she is left with is the past. And now we see that all the souls that she has slain, all the turmoil she has faced, and all the guilt pushed onto her by others, directly or indirectly, are catching up to her at once. Even at one point pushing her to the ultimate breaking point, believing that one does not deserve to be alive. But if there is one thing that Violet cannot forget, it's everything Gilbert has done for her, and everything she's done for others. No matter how small or insignificant it is, that single little inkling of a thought that is, hey, I did this for someone, is enough to get her to believe that she has made a difference. Even though she can't change anything in the past, she can change, so that she can use her own strengths to help others. And the ultimate thesis, it is never too late to discover who you really are. In Violet's case, she has grown to be one of the most compassionate people in any medium ever. Now, these few moments in episodes 8 and 9, and even more so 13, could have toppled Violet's character, but I think it was helped by the presence of this series' closest thing to an antagonist, Dietrich, which I apologize if I call him Dietfried a whole lot. Dietrich is the complete opposite of Gilbert, with the root of all his beliefs being that Violet cannot change. But this is challenged time and time again by Violet in her quest to discover more shades to herself in order to understand Gilbert's last words. And it does help that Dietrich has somewhat of an about-face in the end, and thus after all this, Violet writes a letter to the seemingly late Gilbert to process her trauma. In this moment, she is finally able to cast off that identity of a war machine and accept herself for the compassionate person she is. But it can't be helped that she doesn't have any proper closure. So, spoilers for the plebeians who still haven't seen the movie. After everything that's happened, Violet still feels like something is missing in her life. Even if she's reconciled with herself, she still wishes she could tell Gilbert everything she's learned and how much she's grown. Well, she has that chance, because after a quick look at a few letters, it's discovered that Gilbert is actually alive. Now, I already went in depth with this in my very recent review of the Violet Evergarden movie, so I'll try not to talk about this for too long. Gilbert's presence did initially alarm me, as I thought it would retroactively make the series worse, but as said, it actually made me adore and appreciate the series even more. She's praised for her work in the beginning of the movie, but she denies it, saying she isn't worthy of praise. which shows that even though she's okay with living, it doesn't mean she can't think lowly of herself. And this carries over to Gilbert's arc, which is actually a solid continuation of that one moment in episode 13. He wants Violet to have free will and be herself, but he feels that the only way she can do that is if he isn't around, since he blames himself for all her misfortunes. Practically, this is kind of accurate, but metaphorically, this is a brilliant allegory for people in real life who are guilt-ridden. And yet, Violet remembers everything differently from Gilbert. To her, he is the reason she's able to love herself now, thanks to his actions and his words. And to tell him all these feelings, she writes one final letter expressing her love and gratitude to him before departing from the island. Except not. Once Gilbert receives Violet's words, he realizes that in this moment they both put each other in a positive light instead of themselves, and that right now the best course of action is to be there for her to make sure she feels loved by someone, by the one person who has been with her all this time, even when he physically wasn't. And Violet is going to take that second chance to spend time with the person that has loved her since the very beginning. This is probably the best closure that Violet can ever get. At the end of it all, trying to find the right words to express why I like Violet Evergarden so much as a protagonist has actually made me adore her in her respective series more and more. There have been times when I had questioned why I love this show so much, and there were times after watching certain shows when I thought of the possibility of preferring those to this series. But this franchise has the one thing that will always make it my favorite show ever, and that is Violet Evergarden. She's a very well thought out character with so much depth, great characterization, and honestly, the best character arc in anything, fight me. I really do just love her character to bits.